This presentation is on ecosystems for responsible artificial intelligence. I'll start with a story to give some context. In January 2021, an American algorithmic hiring company had undergone an independent audit that showed its algorithms to be unbiased, or so they claimed. For years, this hiring company had used artificial intelligence to analyze facial features and movements of job candidates during interviews. So people were algorithmically assessed based on their features and movements. This technology was audited by an algorithmic auditing company, so an external audit. However, it was claimed that the hiring company that was audited misrepresented the audit results. So in the end, were job candidates actually assessed fairly by the algorithms? Who ensures that the audit itself was unbiased? Without going into details, this example shows the complex nature of this emerging algorithmic audit industry and responsible AI more generally. It shows that governing artificial intelligence and ensuring its social responsible development are large-scale challenges. They require action at many levels, not only within organizations, but also in industries, in governments, and at the global level. In this presentation, I claim that ecosystems for responsible AI are currently shaped in Europe through a layered set of future expectations. In particular, I'm going to propose a model to structure sets of expectations. Studying expectations helps us to understand the motivation behind developments such as the proposed EU AI regulation. And looking into expectations in, beyond the surface in more depth allows us to identify leverage points to promote responsible AI, to take it further. So there's a shared understanding that ensuring responsible AI requires networked cooperation of multiple actors. However, markets or ecosystems around responsible AI have not yet emerged. And there are many open questions around who should ensure responsible use of AI, how this should be done, the mechanisms, what kind of actor networks could ensure responsible AI, and so on. And there are many ecosystem literature streams, such as platforms, service ecosystems. We argue that the emerging ecosystem around responsible AI, however, should be seen more as a kind of centered on a core value proposition, rather than having one central player, such as a platform company. So more around this abstract value proposition of responsible AI. Emerging responsible AI ecosystems are currently discussed in strategies in policy papers, including by the European Union. And these ecosystems presently exist most of all in expectations, articulated by different actors. Expectations are images of the future, images that actors form regarding future states of the world and how they perceive their actions to influence outcomes. It's important to study expectations because expectations influence agendas, influence decision-making, help to mobilize resources. In other words, expectations have real-world effects. And these expectations, they're often written into documents, which can then be studied. They're kind of externalized into documents, and then we can study them using document analysis, as we did. And in early ecosystem development, expectations kind of lay out a blueprint or a vision, a kind of guiding vision. Of course, AI development as such is a global phenomenon. It's dominated by the United States and China. However, in responsible AI, the European Union aspires to be a key player. And on the 10th of April in 2018, 25 European countries signed a declaration of cooperation on artificial intelligence. So from the start, the European approach emphasizes not only Europe's competitiveness, but also considering societal, ethical, legal issues in artificial intelligence. So thinking about governance and responsibility issues from the start. Since 2018, the EU has produced several AI strategy documents which express expectations and define the agenda on AI research and policy in Europe and possibly beyond. In our study, we examined 5 of these strategy documents that you can see here to understand EU expectations on responsible AI and responsible AI ecosystems. So we conducted a qualitative study, qualitative document analysis of 5 key EU strategy papers on AI published between 2018 and 2020. Our objective was to make sense of the set of expectations on potential responsible AI ecosystems expressed in these documents. For that, we constructed an analytical framework to categorize expectations. But starting from the why question, placing expectations into distinct categories helps stakeholders to decide what to do and what not to do in response to expectations. So it helps people and organizations to identify what kind of expectations are coming from stakeholders, from regulators, from policymakers, and how to deal with them, and how to kind of encounter these discourses from these stakeholders. So first of all, discourses on responsible AI tend to carry strong ethical components. Expectations are often rhetorically connected to widely shared values, kind of common normative grounds to make them more convincing. Therefore, adapting ideas from Vivian Schmidt's discursive institutionalism, we can distinguish between cognitive expectations and normative expectations. Cognitive expectations define problems and offer solutions, and normative expectations relate to how policies and ideas meet aspirations and ideals, more of a normative kind of evaluative mode. On the other hand, expectations can be divided according to what they are about. So expectations can concern socio-technical systems in the broad sense, and in this case they are beliefs about the phenomenon, so responsible AI, and about its future developments. The beliefs are not only about the technology as such, but also about the social processes surrounding it, so hence socio-technical systems. On the other hand, expectations can tie into action more directly, being expressed as agenda statements on how issues should be tackled, or more evaluative agenda statements in this kind of normative mode. Finally, expectations can concern beliefs about current and future actor networks. So the resulting framework has 6 types of expectations, as shown on this slide. If we look at previous studies on responsible AI, previous studies have discussed AI ethics principles at length. They've discussed responsible design practices, accountability, technical explainability quite a lot, and also governance mechanisms. Empirical studies have looked into attributions of responsibility, ethics practices in startups, and so on. In previous work, future orientation and actor networks tend to be somewhat kind of implicit. In contrast, we foreground these elements, so we foreground future expectations and networks and study naturally occurring document material. So in our study, we conducted a qualitative document analysis. We used this 6-fold framework that is presented here to place excerpts from documents into these categories, and then derived more general themes from the excerpts in each of the 6 kind of positions on this framework. So what did the analysis reveal about EU expectations on emerging responsible AI ecosystems? Well, we can identify at least 4 key themes. Firstly, trust and trustworthiness are seen as the foundation of responsible AI, and it's a prominent cognitive expectation, and this is seen to kind of make it possible for the transformative potential of AI to be realized. So trust is a foundation for the potential of AI to be realized. And trust is seen as a prerequisite for increased AI adoption. And trust in turn requires clear regulation, auditing, and explainability in AI systems. Secondly, from a normative standpoint, ethics and competitiveness are argued to be complementary. So ethical AI is seen as a kind of win-win proposition, a kind of sustainable approach in general. In the documents, strong ethical values are argued to also create an appealing brand for European businesses, a kind of trustworthy AI brand for European businesses to differentiate themselves globally. The connection to shared European values creates a normative basis for imagining responsible AI ecosystems. Thirdly, turning to the agenda and the normative side of the agenda, So what to do in Europe? The EU documents argue that there's a need to find a distinct European approach. This avoids fragmentation, but also provides a common value-based project or organizing vision to promote responsible AI in Europe, a kind of guiding vision. European values, fundamental rights, human dignity are seen to be the foundation of this vision. Fourth and finally, going to networks, the end result of the narrative is that Europe is seen as a potential global leader in responsible AI. Global arenas like the OECD, UNESCO, the World Trade Organization are important, but Europe leads the way, kind of building alliances around shared values. So this provides a normative stance on desirable future networks, where Europe acts as the ecosystem leader and sets the global standards on responsible AI development and use. So Europe as a kind of orchestrator or ecosystem leader. Coming back to the scientific and practical relevance of our study, we argue that our framework offers a map to the so-called sea of expectations coming from policymakers and regulators, potentially also other stakeholders. So this map helps to prioritize and respond to these expectations. For example, technology providers can give more weight to trust when trust and AI acceptance are seen as part of a bigger picture, part of a kind of larger normative project of ecosystem building. More broadly, the EU expectations on responsible AI that we studied seem to have a layered structure. So at the base, beliefs on trust and the potential of AI provide a shared basis for action, which is then taken further in the next step in the normative vision and also delimited geographically to Europe. So finding this European kind of path. Then in the final layer, the European focus expands again into a global network where Europe is seen as a leader on responsible AI, a kind of ecosystem leader. So this kind of layered structure of expectations could potentially be considered in ecosystem design, which could mean investigating shared beliefs and desired normative directions as parts and prerequisites for ecosystem building. However, then the question arises to what extent ecosystems can be purposefully designed in the first place, and to what extent ecosystems tend to kind of emerge more organically. So this study can't answer the question whether the European project of responsible AI will be successful or not. And it could even have some problematic consequences and problematic outcomes. However, we do provide a framework for understanding expectations on emerging ecosystems, and also starting points for future research into responsible AI ecosystems. So thinking about future research directions, this could be studying expectations comparatively in different regions, and studying new business models in responsible AI, for example. The methodological approach of qualitative document analysis using this six-fold expectations framework was useful in placing responsible AI themes into a bigger picture. The identification of an overall storyline is crucial, as the themes themselves have been covered in prior literature to quite a large extent. The methodological approach could be tested in other cases in future research to see how it works in similar socio-technical phenomena, such as cybersecurity, for instance. In the responsible AI case, the document material could be supplemented with stakeholder interviews, possibly also ethnographic work to provide a fuller picture of the dynamics of expectations and emerging ecosystems. So the documents by themselves don't necessarily yield a kind of full picture at all. In general, AI research and development has seen summers and winters, upturns and downturns. At the moment, it seems that AI adoption is likely to grow, and AI looks to become more commonplace across domains such as healthcare, transport, and so on and so on. At the same time, the rules for these generic technologies are being drawn. Networks and ecosystems are being built based on shared ideas of responsibility and ethics. Future directions of responsible AI ecosystems are made in the present, in expectations and actions. So fostering a viable ecosystem for responsible AI is crucial, both from economic and ethical perspectives. Thank you.